have issues in your own countries. But in Britain, it's illegal migration. And I suspect that may be the same in a number of other countries. For too many years, it's been too easy for people to come here, slip into the shadow economy, and remain here illegally. Because, frankly, we've been squeamish about saying things.
The chart that should terrify Keir Starmer. Before we dive into what might be the most damning political data Labour has seen in decades, do yourself a favour and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to be here when this government inevitably implodes. Right, let's get into it. Now, whilst King Charles sits comfortably at Buckingham Palace, watching political theatre unfold with what one can only imagine is a mixture of constitutional duty and mild amusement, his Prime Minister is facing an altogether different sort of crisis. And unlike His Majesty, Sir Keir Starmer doesn't have the luxury of remaining above the fray. He's drowning in it. There's a chart doing the rounds that should absolutely terrify the Prime Minister. In fact, if Sir Keir had any sense, he'd have this graphic pinned to his wall as a daily reminder of just how spectacularly things are unraveling. Election Maps UK has released data from the 115 council by-elections held since the May local elections, covering 118 seats, and the numbers are nothing short of catastrophic for Labour. But here's where it gets properly interesting, because this isn't just bad news, this is existential crisis territory. Since May 1st, Reform UK has gained 44 council seats. Let that sink in for a moment. 44 seats. The Liberal Democrats, ever the opportunists, have picked up 9. Now, you'd think Labour, the party of government, the party that swept to power with promises of change and competence, would be consolidating their position, wouldn't you? Well, brace yourself, because Labour has lost 29 seats. 29. The Conservatives, a party still reeling from their historic defeat and identity crisis, have only lost 12. Labour is losing twice as many seats as the party they obliterated just months ago. But wait, it gets worse. Much worse. Since the local elections, Labour has managed to secure just 12 council seats. The Green Party has won 11. Read that again. Labour, the governing party, is barely 1 seat ahead of the Greens in council by-elections. This isn't just a wobble. This is a full-blown implosion in slow motion, and the political class is watching with barely concealed fascination. Sir Keir has just emerged from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, and one suspects he wasn't greeted with quite the hero's welcome he might have hoped for. Questions about his leadership are no longer whispered in corridors. They are being shouted from the rooftops. There's open speculation about a challenge from Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester mayor who seems to be positioning himself as Labour's saviour in waiting. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage and his Reform UK juggernaut continue to dominate the polls with a comfortable lead that must keep the Prime Minister up at night. Labour's promises on taxation, spending, and immigration are looking increasingly like hollow rhetoric rather than serious policy commitments. The British public, never ones to suffer fools gladly, are watching with growing scepticism as the gap between Labour's words and actions widens into a chasm. And here's the thing about British voters. They'll forgive many things, but they absolutely despise being taken for mugs. At the recent Labour conference, Sir Keir and his ministerial colleagues decided to go on the offensive. Their target? Nigel Farage himself. They went after Reform's policy to remove the right to remain from some migrants legally living in Britain, branding it repeatedly as racist and immoral. It was a calculated political attack, designed to put Farage on the back foot and dent Reform's polling surge. Bold strategy. Let's see if it pays off. Shall we? Spoiler alert, it hasn't. In a fascinating interview with Sky's Beth Rigby, following his keynote speech, Sir Keir was pressed on whether he believed Nigel Farage was racist. His answer was telling. No, he said, nor did he think Reform voters were racist. They are concerned about borders, frustrated about the pace of change. It was a remarkable retreat from the aggressive rhetoric of the conference floor. One might call it having your cake and eating it too, branding policies as racist while simultaneously insisting the man proposing them, and the people supporting them aren't racist at all. It's the sort of political gymnastics that would make an Olympic contortionist wince. Nick Ferrari on LBC pushed the Prime Minister further, raising Farage's claim that calling Reform policies racist would incite and encourage the radical left and potentially threaten the safety of Reform members. It's a serious accusation, the sort that demands a serious answer. When asked directly if he put his political opponent at risk, Sir Keir was unequivocal. No, that's not the case. Short, sharp, categorical. But the damage, as they say, was already done. Nigel Farage, never one to miss an opportunity, penned a column in the Daily Mail that dripped with wounded dignity and barely suppressed fury. His opinion of Sir Keir had shifted, he wrote, as a result of the Prime Minister's conference comments. They might disagree on their worldview, but until this weekend, Farage believed Starmer was a reasonable human being. Now, he claimed to be shocked at the PM's behavior, hoping that Starmer would wake up feeling ashamed of what he'd done to British politics. It's theatrical, certainly, but it's also politically astute. Farage has positioned himself as a victim of establishment attacks, the outsider being smeared by a desperate government, and his supporters will lap it up. Here's what makes this entire situation so deliciously ironic. Labour spent years in opposition criticizing the Conservatives for divisive politics, for culture wars, for attacking opponents rather than presenting positive vision. And now, months into government, they are doing precisely the same thing. They are lashing out at reform because they are terrified of reform. Those council by-election numbers tell you everything you need to know about why. Reform isn't just winning seats, they are winning the argument. They are tapping into genuine concerns about immigration, about national identity, about the pace and scale of social change that millions of Britons feel has been imposed upon them without their consent. Whether you agree with reform solutions or not, and plenty don't, you cannot deny they are speaking to voters that Labour has abandoned. Working-class communities that once formed Labour's electoral bedrock are now flirting with, or outright embracing, Farage's party. That should terrify Labour strategists more than any chart or polling data. The Liberal Democrats, meanwhile, are doing what they do best, quietly hoovering up disaffected voters in their traditional strongholds whilst everyone else is distracted by the Labour reform battle. 9 council seats might not sound like much, but it's 9 more than they had, and it represents a party that's rebuilding after their own near-death experience. The Greens, with their 11 seats, are also making inroads, appealing to younger, more progressive voters who find Labour's triangulation and caution deeply uninspiring. And the Conservatives? They are losing seats, certainly, but only 12 compared to Labour's 29. For a party that suffered one of the worst general election defeats in British history, that's actually not terrible. It suggests there's a flaw to their support, a core of voters who will stick with them regardless. More importantly, it suggests that Labour's victory in July wasn't the seismic realignment some claimed it was. It was a protest vote against Conservative incompetence, not a love letter to Keir Starmer's Labour. And protest voters are notoriously fickle. The political landscape is fragmenting before our eyes. The two-party system that dominated British politics for generations is crumbling, replaced by something more volatile, more unpredictable, more genuinely competitive across multiple parties. For viewers, for political observers, for anyone who cares about how this country is governed, this is the most fascinating period in British politics for decades. We're watching the old order collapse in real time, and nobody, not even the politicians themselves, really knows what comes next. Sir Keir Starmer came to power promising stability, competence, boring but effective government after years of Conservative chaos. Instead, he's presiding over a party that's hemorrhaging support in by-elections, facing internal dissent, and watching helplessly as Reform UK builds momentum. His attacks on Farage have backfired, making the Reform leader look like a martyr whilst making Labour look desperate and out of ideas. The chart from Election Maps UK isn't just bad data. It's a warning sign, a flashing red light that Labour's electoral coalition is fracturing faster than anyone anticipated. The question now is whether Sir Keir can stabilise his position before the damage becomes irreparable. Can he win back working-class voters without alienating progressive metropolitan base that delivered him the Labour leadership? Can he present a positive vision for Britain that goes beyond not being the Conservatives? Can he deliver on his promises whilst navigating a fractious parliamentary party and a hostile media environment? On current evidence, the answer to all those questions is a resounding maybe. At best, the next few months will be critical. If Labour continues to bleed support in by-elections, if reform continues to surge, if the internal whispers about Enda Burnham grow louder, then Sir Keir's premiership could be in genuine jeopardy. We've seen how quickly political fortunes can turn in British politics. Theresa May went from inevitable to impossible in months. Boris Johnson's seemingly unassailable majority crumbled. Liz Truss, well, the less said about that particular car crash, the better. Keir Starmer is not immune to the same forces that destroyed his predecessors. Right, that's where we are. A government barely 6 months old, already looking shaky. A prime minister under pressure from all sides. An opposition that's fragmented but dangerous. And a chart that tells the story better than any speech or spin ever could. This is British politics in 2025, chaotic, unpredictable, and absolutely unmissable. If you want to stay ahead of the chaos, if you want analysis that cuts through the nonsense, then subscribe to UK Connors. We'll be here, watching every twist, every turn, every spectacular implosion. See you in the next one.